Sure can't wait. Okay. All right. So remember how we talked about inductive reasoning the other day? We said it was you make an observation or you make a conclusion or a conjecture based off of observations and patterns of things you see. So we're going to talk today about a couple of types of deductive reasoning. We're going to start with the law of detachment. Give me just a second. Okay, so unlike inductive reasoning, which uses specific patterns or examples or observations to make a general conclusion, deductive reasoning is how we say it, deductive. Deductive reasoning uses general facts, rules, definitions, or properties to reach specific, valid conclusions. So for deductive reasoning, you use rules, laws, facts, things like that, theorems that we're going to talk about, we'll get to in the next few sections. So, like, for example, the new rule about your cell phone is if you have your cell phone out after your first warning, you get sent to ISS, right? So I could say, and I'm not picking on you, but I could say, Amir, that's your second time with your cell phone, go to ISS, right? So you can make that conclusion based off of the rules. Or if I'm speeding, guess what I'm going to do? I'm going to get a ticket, right? So if I'm driving 80 in a 55, you can probably conclude that I'm going to get a ticket, right? So that's the difference between inductive and deductive. Inductive is based off of patterns and observations. Deductive is based off of rules and facts, definitions, things like that. So the first law that we are going to talk about that is related to deductive reasoning is called the law of detachment. Okay, the law of detachment. Okay, so in using our P's and Q's like we did when we talked about our hypothesis and conclusion, what law of detachment says is if P then Q is a true statement, so like if I speed, then I'm going to get a ticket. That would be my true statement, right? Then what the law of detachment is going to say, well, Miss Bridges was doing 80 in a 55. And it's going to ask you what kind of conclusion you can make, and you can say, okay, well, if she was speeding, which she was, then she's going to get a ticket, okay? They gave an example here. If a car is out of gas, then it will not start. Then it says that Sarah's car is out of gas, and it's asking you what conclusion you can make. Her car can't start, right? Does that make sense? Okay. So you're going to give an if-then statement. If P, then Q. Then they're going to tell you that the hypothesis is true. So then your conclusion that you can make is that the conclusion is also true. But before we start with examples of law of detachment, what we're going to do is we're going to just read some statements and we're going to decide, are they making conclusions based off of inductive or deductive, patterns and observations, or rules and facts? Everybody ready? Yeah. All right, so the first one, take a minute, read it. If a student is late returning a library book, then he or she will be charged a $2 late fee. Chang returned a library book late, so he concludes that he will be charged a $2 late fee. Is that inductive or deductive? Which one? Deductive, yes, based off of rules, right? So that's going to be deductive. Remember, inductive is based off of patterns and observations. Take a minute and read B and tell me what you think. Inductive or deductive? Don't say it out loud. You already have a chance to read it. Just read the statement for B and tell me if you think it's inductive based off of patterns and observations, or is it deductive based off of rules and facts and things like that. Every time Tamika has worn her favorite jersey to a football game, her school's team has won the game. I wish that worked for Florida State because she don't work. Tamika is wearing her favorite jersey to the football game tonight, so she concludes that her school's team will win the game. Inductive or deductive? Inductive, yes. Based off of what she's observed. Not rules or definitions or facts. All right, go ahead and try C. Read it. Tell me what you think. Inductive or deductive? Newton's first law of motion states that an object at rest will remain at rest unless acted on by an unbalanced force. Alyssa watches a soccer ball roll across the field. She concludes that an unbalanced force has acted upon the soccer ball. Inductive or deductive? Deductive is based off of a law, right? All right, go ahead and try that last one, D. Inductive or deductive? Take a minute, read over it. Observations and patterns, rules, facts, definitions. That's the difference. Just remember, we should not have our phone out on our desks. This should be away. Mrs. Jackson notices that her family's data usage is increasing by approximately 2,500 megabytes of data every month. So she concludes that her family's data usage next month will be 2,500 megabytes greater than this month's data usage. Inductive or deductive? Which one? No. It's based off of something she observes, so that would be inductive, right? Mm-mm.
Yeah, I was right. I was going to say, because she can't fact check.
Right, right. Exactly. Do we understand the difference between inductive and deductive? Okay. All right. Now we're going to read a statement, and we're going to try to say if the conclusion is valid or not using the law of detachment. I'm going to kind of explain how it goes as we go through it. So it says, to go on a field trip, a student must turn in a permission slip. Mariana turned in her permission slip. The conclusion they're saying is that she can go on the field trip. Is that a valid conclusion or invalid? Valid meaning it's going to be true, right? Meaning it's going to happen. Invalid is I don't have enough information to say that that's going to happen. So the original statement says, if you turn in a permission slip, then you get to go on the field trip. And it says that Mariana turned in a permission slip. The conclusion they're saying is that she's going to get to go on the field trip. Is that valid or invalid? Valid. Okay. She did what she was supposed to, so therefore that is a valid conclusion that she will be able to go on that field trip. Okay. On B, it says if a figure is a square, then it is a polygon. Then it goes on to say that figure A is a polygon. Is it a valid conclusion to say that figure A is a square? Valid or invalid, right? It's invalid. Let's talk about why. So it says if a figure is a square, okay, then it is a polygon. So if it's a square, then it's a polygon. Then it goes on to tell me that figure A is a polygon. Just because it's a polygon, does it mean it's a square? No. Okay. So let me talk to you about the detachment. For law of detachment, in order for it to be a valid conclusion, they're going to say, if your hypothesis, then your conclusion. In order for it to be valid, they have to restate the hypothesis. Okay, so what it is if P, if your hypothesis, then Q, what they're going to say is that P is true. That's your law of detachment. They're going to repeat the hypothesis, putting a name to something that you're talking about, okay? If they repeat the conclusion, that is not a valid statement. That is not, we can't make a valid conclusion on that. Is if the hypothesis, then the conclusion, and then they're going to say the hypothesis is true, so your conclusion would say, well, then that conclusion is also true. Does that make a little bit of sense? They have to restate the hypothesis, not the conclusion. All right. So what we're doing now is we're looking at this multiple choice. We're going to determine if it is valid or invalid and why. So read where it says given. Everybody sees that? See where it says given? Read that sentence. It says if 3 points are non-collinear, what's the hypothesis there? So 3 points are non-collinear. That's my hypothesis. So in order for me to be able to make a valid answer, I'm going to have to restate that at some point, okay? It says, then they determine a plane. Determine a plane is my conclusion. What does it say about points A, B, and C? It says they lie in a plane. What was my hypothesis again? That they have to be non-collinear. Did it say points A, B, and C are non-collinear? Yeah, in the first sentence, right here. Right here, okay. So if it doesn't state the hypothesis here, then we cannot make a valid conclusion. They're doing it backwards. Okay, so we're saying that this is going to be invalid. We just have to decide why. So how many options do you have for invalid? How many options in those answer choices do you have that say invalid? Two. We have to figure out which one of those is the correct one. Okay, so we know it's not A, and we know it's not B. It says for invalid, the first one, points A, B, and C determine plane G, therefore they are non-collinear. So let's think about that for a minute. And it's invalid, or it's invalid because points A, B, and C can be collinear and lie in a plane. If it says that 3 points are non-collinear, then they determine a plane, okay? But then it says that A, B, and C are in a plane. Do they have to be non-collinear to be in the same plane? Here's my plane G, yes? That could be points A, B, and C, correct? Okay. Could that also be points A, B, and C and them still be in the plane? So which one do you think, C or D? Why is it invalid? D, yes, because they could be collinear and still be in the same plane. That was kind of hard. Does everybody see a little bit there? Somewhat, sort of? Okay. All right, let me ask you this. Let me give you a for example. This is what I'm going to ask you to do. If it is raining, then I will use my umbrella. Okay, does everybody agree that that is an if-then statement with a hypothesis and a conclusion? Yes. Okay. Then what I'm going to say is that it is raining outside. Using the law of detachment, what can I say? That Ms. Bridges will what? Mm-hmm. Does that make sense a little bit? Yes. In order to use the law of detachment, your hypothesis, your conclusion. They're going to restate the hypothesis, therefore you're going to determine the conclusion. Okay. I'll do some examples on this to help clear that up. Everybody ready? Okay. I don't know what's going on over here, but huh? Exactly. I don't know. All right, the next thing we're going to talk about is the law of syllogism. Okay, syllogism. Everybody ready? Sure, can't wait. Okay. One law that is related to deductive reasoning is the law of syllogism. And don't worry, on the quiz, I'm going to have these words printed for you so you don't have to worry about trying to spell them. I'll tell you in the directions, choose law of detachment or law of syllogism. That way you can just copy them. This law allows you to draw conclusions from two full conditional statements. Okay, two full conditional statements. How many conditional statements did I have in my law of detachment? A conditional statement is an if-then statement. How many of those did I have? Just one. Law of syllogism is going to use two. So that's how you're going to be able to tell the difference between the two. So what it says in that box with our letters P and Q, it says your first conditional statement is going to say if P, then Q. Then you're going to have a second one that says if Q, then some other piece R. Okay. If P is true, then Q is true. If Q is true, then R is true. So your statement that you're going to be able to say from this is if P is true, what do you think? Q. Okay, if P, thank you. If Q, then R. So if P, then, you see how these are the same? We can leave those out and just say, then R. And that's what that says right there. So an example in words, if you get a job, then you will earn money. That's my first conditional statement. The second one says, if you earn money, then you will buy a car. Do you notice how the conclusion in the first statement is the hypothesis in the second statement? Okay. As long as those two parts match, then we can basically drop those off and make a conclusion that says if P, so if you get a job, then you will buy a car. We can leave out the whole earn money part. Make a little bit of sense? Okay. You know the transitive property, if A equals B and B equals C, then A equals C? Same kind of concept. No, you don't remember that? Okay. Are we ready? So in that big long paragraph up at the top, it really has nothing to do with our question. It says, scientists have found that the quality and amount of sleep greatly impact learning and memory. Lack of sleep causes students to have trouble focusing and receiving information. Sleep deprivation also makes it difficult to retrieve previously learned information. Draw a valid conclusion from the given statements if possible. So what does my first one say? If you do not get enough sleep, then you will be tired. That's my first conditional statement, correct? Okay. Then the next one says, if you are tired, then you will not do well on your test. So what I'm looking at here, in my first one, does the hypothesis, the conclusion, I'm tired myself, does the conclusion in the first statement match the hypothesis in the second statement? Yes. So what this is saying is we are able to draw a valid conclusion by basically getting rid of those and saying if you do not get enough sleep, Then what?
You're not doing it.
Right. Then you will not do well on your test. So again, if the conclusion in the first statement matches the hypothesis in the second statement, then you can make a valid conclusion using the law of syllogism. If they do not match, you are not able to make a conclusion. You would just say not possible or not valid. Yes. All right, let's take a look at this next one. Again, they give you a whole lot of information that you don't really need to do the question. It says the Grand Canyon covers an area of 1,900 square miles and contains 277 miles of the Colorado River. Since the Grand Canyon became a national park in 1919, over 193 million people have visited. Draw a valid conclusion from the given statements, if possible. We don't even really need to know all of that to be able to do this. They just like to put a lot of words in there to make people stress out. So it says, if Ebony takes a vacation, then she will go to the Grand Canyon. If Ebony goes to the Grand Canyon, then she will hike the Colorado River. So what I want you to do, look at the conclusion in the first statement and the hypothesis in the second. If they match, we can draw a valid conclusion by getting rid of those two matching pieces and writing the leftover stuff. So I want you to try to write your conclusion based off of what we have there. We want to try to make a valid conclusion if possible. If the conclusion in the first statement matches the hypothesis in the second, we are able to make a valid conclusion. If they do not match, we just say not possible. Does the conclusion in my first statement, she will go to the Grand Canyon, match the hypothesis in the second statement? Do they both talk about going to the Grand Canyon? Yeah, so they do match. So we are able to make a statement. So remember, we just basically cross those out. And our statement is, if Ebony takes a vacation, then she will hike the Colorado River. Maybe. If my stuff will let me write. Again, if the conclusion of the first statement does not match the hypothesis in the second, there is no valid conclusion that can be made. One if-then statement is going to be syllogism. Two if-then, I'm lying. One if-then statement is detachment. Two if-then statements is syllogism. So what we're going to do now is we're going to practice using those and making valid conclusions if we can. So with that first example, everybody ready? Mm-hmm. How many if-then statements do I have? Just the first statement. Question number one. If it rains, then the flower will grow. There's only one, right? So this is going to be our detachment. In order to make a valid conclusion, they have to have restated the hypothesis. Okay, my hypothesis says if it rains. Did they restate that? Okay, so they said it will rain, so what can you tell me as your valid conclusion? The flowers will grow, yes. And you're going to have to say on the quiz whether that is detachment or syllogism. Because it is just one if-then statement, that is detachment. Okay, I know it doesn't ask us for that here, but we're going to have to do that on the quiz. You're going to have to tell me which one it is. Is it detachment or is it syllogism? Okay, try number 2. First thing you need to look at, is it 1 or 2 if-then statements? One if-then statement is detachment. They must repeat the hypothesis in order for you to make a valid conclusion. If it's 2 if-then statements, the conclusion of the first has to match the hypothesis of the second in order to make a valid conclusion. They may not be word for word, but if they're talking about the same thing, just the words kind of tweaked a little bit, then you can make a valid conclusion. If there are 2 points on a grid, then a line can be drawn through them. Then it tells me that 2 points are graphed on a grid. Did I repeat my hypothesis basically? Yes. So should I be able to make a valid conclusion? Yes. What would that valid conclusion be about those points that are graphed on a grid? Exactly. That's all you need to write. A line can be drawn through them. What is that? Detachment or syllogism? I forgot. Detachment, because it's just one if-then statement. How many if-then statements for number 3 there? 2, right? So this is going to be syllogism if we can make a valid conclusion. The conclusion in the first statement has to match the hypothesis in the second. It says, if Cody is not on time, then he will be fired. Then it says, if Cody is fired, then Ashanti will get his job. Does the conclusion in the first statement match the hypothesis in the second statement? Yes. So we can make a valid conclusion. We can say if Cody is not on time, okay. Remember, the conclusion in the first matches the hypothesis in the second, so we basically leave those out, and our statement will, leave those out, and our statement will be what's left. If Cody is not on time, then what? My pen's not wanting to work again. I want you to try that last one for me. It's 2 full if-then statements. The conclusion of the first has to match the hypothesis of the second. If it does, you just basically leave those parts out. And I forgot to write it. Number 3 is what? Detachment or syllogism? Syllogism, because it's 2 if-then statements, yes. Are we able to make a valid conclusion for number 4?
No.
Yes, it said, the original statement say, if I get a good grade, then my parents are happy. Then it says, if my parents are happy, then I get to go to the party. So our conclusion would be, if I get good grades, then I can go to the party. And that is what, detachment or syllogism? Syllogism, because it is two if then statements. I want to talk to you about this homework. It looks like a whole lot, but it's really not. You just have to read mostly. Okay.
So just give like a to the point type answer. Like you don't have to